Greetings, my loves, and welcome to another episode of Shakti Temple Talks. Today, I feel very inspired to go into a topic that is supremely alive in my life. It is a topic that I am not an expert in, however, I have a lot of curiosity and passion around, and that is the honoring of the sexes. And while I chose to title this particular talk The Honoring of the Sexes, and I'm going to go into very binary realms, speaking of the masculine and feminine, I am not speaking as far as male and female. Masculine and feminine are two forces in creation that allow life to exist, and we all have masculine and feminine within us. And we identify with one or the other more strongly, regardless of our actual gender. So this is, as I speak about masculine and feminine, I'm really speaking about our essence, where we identify on that spectrum. So an honoring of the sexes, I'm going to go very binary into this and even go into this concept through the lens of the Tao, and specifically the lens of Taoist sexuality. So what's really alive for me is how we find as a species, as beings, this place of balance, this place of deep honoring between these two poles. First and foremost within ourselves, and then in our relationship with other, especially our romantic, intimate, most intimate relationships, the people we're sharing our bodies with, our hearts, our souls, our whole being. And then how this then ripples out from the microcosm to the macrocosm to create that balance and that honoring on a global level within all of the world, within the whole universe even. I really believe that what we create, that resonance, that harmony, that peace, that honoring we can create within ourselves ripples out in larger and larger levels. So what I want to discuss today is this idea, right, that we have the masculine, we have the feminine, and we have this desire between the two to interplay. And in the Taoist system, the masculine is akin to the element of fire, right? And this is speaking of the sexual energy of the masculine, while the feminine is akin to water. And there are very essential needs of fire and water, of the masculine and feminine within intimate relationship, within that yin-yang of coming together, of spiraling, of becoming one entity, the entity of relationship, which is that place of wholeness. Now this can again be within ourselves or even with another. We do create another entity when we come together, right? And we're constantly in relationship trying to navigate and find that place of balance, right? Or I hope that's what we're trying to do. So today's talk is all about what is true equality? How can we truly honor the balancing of the sexes? And specifically within relationship dynamics. So fire, the masculine, has an essential need for freedom. An essential need. And again, this is not just men who have this, women also have this need. Our masculine has this need, right? Within the yin-yang symbol, the yang, which is the masculine, the white side, the light, the ascending force, has some yin in it, while the feminine has some yang in it. So the feminine also has that need for freedom. It's just not as pronounced. It's not the main focus. So within the masculine, there's this incredible need for freedom. If we think of the element of fire, it needs air, it needs room to breathe. The more air it gets, the greater it can burn bright and glow and be powerful and a force of change and transformation. Now, if we take a flame and we put a jar over it, pretty soon that flame will go out. So if we contain the fire element, it essentially ultimately will go out. But if we let it move, if we give it freedom, it can expand. However, it can also be destructive. So there's a harnessing factor to the fire element that needs to be at play. Now, if we go over to the feminine side, to the essence of water, there is an essential need for security, for safety, for containment, for being deeply held. Now, if we think of the water element, the greatest momentum, the most force and power and beauty the water element can have is when it is held by the banks of a river, for example, or, the shores of the ocean. If we think of water that kind of doesn't have containment, it literally kind of pewters out and it loses its power, right? It just gets absorbed into the earth, or it becomes stagnant and starts to grow stuff. So this is the watermelon element uncontained. So this is the deep innate desire of the feminine to be held, to be secure, to be contained. Now here's where the interesting dance comes in, the paradox. So often in our relationships, even within ourselves, even our ability to make commitments or not make commitments, or to hold ourselves or not be able to hold ourselves. So again, microcosm to macrocosm. In our relationships, frequently there's a push and a pull. The feminine wants more security, the masculine wants more freedom, and we can't wrap our brains, our minds, this is the problem actually, is the mind. We can't wrap our mind around what that could possibly look like for both to receive what they need. How do freedom and security work together, right? But these are innate needs, and if we really deeply want to honor these different forces, the masculine and feminine, I believe it's imperative that we find this middle ground, that we find this place to meet. And I especially want to bring this into kind of the counterculture conscious community, because there has been in my observation, kind of a deep shaming of the feminine need for security. And it's had to be sacrificed again and again and again for the masculine need for freedom. Now, in the past, this was opposite in the marriage institutions and all of that. But even then, it was like the feminine was more of a possession. So the feminine's need for freedom wasn't honored necessarily. The masculine had a lot more freedom. The masculine has had a lot more freedom over the years. So we're in this place where there's a great rebalancing, where we're trying to find that how both can coexist. And what I've kind of found in my own inner exploration of that, first and foremost, is we can never receive from other what we're not fully giving ourselves. So as women, as the feminine, there's this desire to be deeply, deeply, deeply held in our entirety. This means emotionally, most specifically, not just physically. This means emotionally held. No matter what our emotions are, unconditionally held. And so frequently the feminine is looking out here for that holding, right? And the most important thing is that we do learn how to hold ourselves, because we cannot have that fully given to us from the outside if we have not cleaned that mirror within ourselves. Because I do believe we're walking in a hall of mirrors. We are going to attract a mirror to show us where we're at or where we're not at. So we need to develop within the feminine this ability to hold ourselves, to accept ourselves in all of our emotional frequencies, and to be able to deeply hold. And then we will start to experience being deeply held outside of ourselves, yeah? Now, on the masculine side, freedom, this deep innate desire for freedom. Can you give yourself that freedom? Are you free? Or is there an inner critic, an inner judgment, an inner something that keeps you blocked from this freedom? There's this interesting concept that I've run into again and again and again, where someone else, someone outside of the masculine, particularly the feminine, can take away your freedom. You are a sovereign being. So there's a claiming of sovereignty that needs to happen in the masculine side of fully owning that you are a free being no matter what. Someone outside of you cannot take away your freedom. Freedom is something so much deeper and innate. And so we're all on this journey, men and women alike, to set ourselves free. This has nothing to do with someone else. And until you can set yourself free within the container of relationship, the masculine can't fully commit. It's when there's a revelation that commitment does not mean loss of freedom that the masculine is able to then commit, when it knows that its fire is not going to be put out. But that's a revelation that has to come from within. There has to be a reconciliation, a revelation that an outside force, an outside being cannot take your freedom, cannot. And then you have to grant yourself that freedom. You have to find those places in you that mirror you've called into your life that appears to be confiscating your freedom. What in you is that mirror reflecting? Where have you not freed yourself? And so as the masculine feminine can find these ways to feminine, deeply hold oneself, masculine, powerfully free oneself, it's in that freedom and then in that willingness. Then there has to be something larger. There has to be a desire for the feminine to encompass the masculine, and their freedom becomes so important. The feminine's ability to deeply hold the self, and then the desire for their partner to feel free. And that becomes the gift. That's the offering. And then on the other side, even though sometimes deeply holding the feminine can feel like a loss of freedom, there's a deeper desire that in your freedom, you want to give the gift of that deep holding, right? And so here's where we stretch. Here's where that Vesica Pisces, we stretch to start to meet the other. We find that sacred space, that third entity, yin and yang, coming together. And the feminine offers to the masculine that freedom. And the masculine offers to the feminine that depth of holding. When that happens, there is a deep foundation into which that freedom, right, the deep holding, that deep foundation, and that the waters of the feminine can start to nourish. And the masculine freedom, that fire, can start to build and grow and transform. And these two forces can come together in such a powerful way and create something so much larger than themselves. And so my inspiration in sharing this today is that I see us collectively. There's kind of a battle being played between the feminine and masculine, and in these desires, and a lot of concessions being made, a giving over to try to meet the other at an expense without doing the inner work for the self first. And I think that it's so important, wherever you identify, whether you identify with the feminine side or the masculine side, to recognize your side and to recognize that this is your work. This is not the other person's work. It never is. It never is. It's our work. But that other plays a very important role. It is the sacred mirror, and I believe wholeheartedly that it is being asked of us at this time to look deeply into that sacred mirror. What is being shown? What is being asked? Where can we, from our sovereignty, from our deep holding of self, from our own freedom, start to stretch and reach to meet the other? And I'm starting to get emotional because I feel like this is the salvation of humanity. I literally believe that with all my heart. I feel that with all my heart. It is when these forces find that depth within themselves that is not so self-centric, that is self-rooted, self-sourced, self-knowledgeable, but from that place has a deeper desire to meet other fully. To show up for self, for other, for creation. The only reason we ever can't show up fully for another is because we're not showing up fully for ourselves. So that's the first step. And then let us do all that we can to find that meeting point, to reconcile, to honor the sexes, to honor the beautiful differences between us that are our inspiration for coming together. There is a phenomenon, there's been a lot of negative connotation given to the idea of codependency. And codependency, sure, when we lose our center into other, into this dance, that is not optimal. But even within this movement of sovereignty, sovereignty to me is a claiming of the self, a claiming of what's mine, and that means what's beautiful about me and also what's shitty about me, right? Sovereignty, really standing in my seat. But from that place, we need each other. There's a reason that after heartbreak, we continue to try to come together with other in this deep, sacred, beautiful, intimate way of romantic relationship. After everything we've been through, it's a miracle. It's because we do need each other. The sexes need each other. Wholeness needs the two to exist in harmony. And the only way for that to be is for us to deeply honor. There needs to be the depth of desire to understand other. And so this is the calling forth. This is the honoring. How do we start to understand this? How do we start to stretch ourselves? How do we nourish ourselves so that we can do that stretching? So it's not making a concession. It's not a losing of center. But it's from that place of sovereignty that we choose interdependence. To be able to count on each other, to be able to be held by each other, to be able to give each other wings. This is, I think, what we all deeply crave. And even, again, the freedom, the feminine also desires freedom, but it needs to feel contained and held, to feel safe, to fly, to flourish, to grow. The masculine, while it has that predominant need of freedom, also has a deep need to be held. And frequently what will happen is the masculine and feminine will shove these counter needs down, the ones they identify less with, to prioritize that bigger need. But deep down in the masculine, there's also a deep need to be held, that need of the feminine. And so there's an alchemy taking place. And I see this in so many intimate relationships right now. For a lot of people, this isn't for everyone, but for a lot of people, there's a lot of hoocha, dross, intensity, friction, happening. Because we're all healing this wound right now. There has been an incredible imbalance. And we need to come together very vulnerably, hearts wide open in spite of thousands of years of the past at this point. Hearts wide open to discover a new way of relating that deeply honors both the feminine need to be deeply held, to feel deeply secure, to feel safe in sharing the depths of the feminine. You can't expect the feminine to offer the deepest waters of her being, her womb, her heart, her soul, without deep safety, trust, containment. Yeah? And we can't expect the masculine to stand in its full power, in its beautiful ability to steward, to protect, to provide, to claim, without allowing them to do so in their full sovereign freedom, in their deepest soul purpose. So my deep prayer is that this talk, this is just so alive for me, and it's something I'm navigating and I'm deep in the well with in my own personal life, deep in the well with figuring this dichotomy out in intimate relationships. And I just hope this provides some insight and some inspiration for us all to just step more fully, to deeply commit to this work so that we can all have more fulfilling relationships, because we all deeply desire to be interdependent, to have those in our lives that we can count on, that we can rest into, that we can shine before, that are our deep soul allies on this journey. So Let's keep doing the good work, family, and let's just keep showing up for ourselves and for our loved ones as best we possibly can until we can realize the experience, the real-time experience of the honoring of the sexes in perfect balance, in perfect harmony, in perfect unity, in the divine dance that was meant to be between these two poles. Thank you for being with me in this exploration. Thank you for doing your best. Thank you for showing up and stretching and doing the inner work that it takes to show up for this task at hand. So much love to you wherever you are on your journey of this continuum.